Hey folks, I know I am just an old guy telling stories, but please leave a like and subscribe before we start. Let's enjoy in today's stories. Before I dive into today's stories, I want to say, disclaimer. The content presented in the video is purely for entertainment purposes only. The theories and stories discussed in this video are speculative and are not supported by any evidence or proof. Viewer discretion is advised. Ever wonder what secrets lie hidden beyond the reach of public knowledge, buried in the depths of government databases? I stumbled into one such secret, quite by accident, and it's too unsettling and bizarre not to share. This isn't your usual conspiracy theory fodder. This is something else, something that feels like it could change the way we look at our place in the cosmos. It started innocently enough. I'm a software developer with a knack for cybersecurity and a healthy dose of curiosity. Late one night, I was exploring various corners of the dark web, using layers of VPNs for anonymity. I wasn't looking for anything specific. It was more about seeing how deep the rabbit hole could go. In a forgotten, dusty corner of a low-traffic forum, I found a link, posted by an anonymous user, that led to a file dump with no description. Skeptical yet intrigued, I downloaded the files to a virtual machine, ensuring any potential threats wouldn't reach my main system. What I found inside was nothing short of cinematic. The files appeared to be internal government documents, detailed reports and emails that I first assumed were elaborate fakes, part of an ARG or a hacker's ambitious project. But as I sifted through them, the authenticity of the content started to weigh on me. These weren't simple PDFs or text files. There were videos, voice recordings, and high-resolution photos, all marked with official seals and barcodes, the kind you can't just whip up in a graphic design afternoon binge. The most shocking documents centered on a project dubbed Eden Resurgence. According to the reports, the government has been in possession of extraterrestrial beings since the late 1960s, discovered in a state of what was described as cryosleep in their damaged spacecraft. The photos showed humanoid figures not too different from us, encased in what looked like sleek, high-tech capsules filled with some sort of stasis fluid. The aim, it seemed, was long-term. A plan was set in motion to revive these beings in the future, specifically at a time when human civilization was on the brink of collapse. The documents detailed a series of protocols for integrating these alien beings into Earth's ecosystem, utilizing their advanced technology and purportedly superior intellect to aid in the reclamation and rebuilding of the planet. The theory was that these beings had engineered their own survival across cosmic distances. Perhaps they could help us save our world in return. What made the documents truly compelling wasn't just the descriptions of the aliens or their technology, but the philosophical and ethical debates contained in the email exchanges. Scientists, politicians, and military officials argued not only the feasibility of the project, but its morality. Could humanity ethically claim stewardship over these beings? What right did we have to decide the fate of another sentient species? I spent the whole night poring over the files, absorbed by the implications of what I was reading. The sun was rising, a sliver of light creeping into my room by the time I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed. It was a lot to process. Who were we as a species if we were planning to use others to save ourselves? And yet there was no threat in these documents, no hint of a cover-up that reached into the dark corners of my own life. No one was coming after me because no one knew I had these files. I was just an anonymous face in the crowd, holding a secret that felt too big for any one person to carry. As of now, I'm left with more questions than answers. What is the true nature of Eden Resurgence? Are these documents real or just an elaborate hoax? And if they are real, what does that mean for the future of humanity? In the wake of my late-night discovery, my initial shock gradually gave way to an insatiable curiosity about the technological implications of what these files contained. If this wasn't some elaborate ruse, the technology described within could herald a new era for humanity. But with such power comes significant responsibility, and the more I read, the more I questioned our readiness for such a leap. The documents detailed various devices found aboard the alien spacecraft, technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics as we understood them. One device in particular caught my attention, a compact energy source described as being capable of powering a small city with no apparent fuel or significant waste production. The scientists' notes were filled with technical jargon and theoretical frameworks that were hard to follow, but conveyed a sense of awe and fear. These scientists speculated that this energy device operated on principles of quantum entanglement and zero-point energy, concepts that are still largely theoretical in our current understanding. The potential applications were limitless. Could we power homes, end energy scarcity, and halt our damaging reliance on fossil fuels? The optimism in the emails was palpable, but so was the caution. Such power could also lead to unprecedented geopolitical conflicts if mishandled. Another section detailed a healing chamber capable of repairing tissue at a cellular level, hinting at the ability to cure diseases that were currently incurable. The implications for medicine were profound, offering a future where illness could be a thing of the past. Yet every breakthrough described was accompanied by intense debate. Ethical considerations were at the forefront of these discussions. The fear of creating a divide between those who had access to alien technologies and those who did not. As I delved deeper, I found references to environmental technologies, including devices that could allegedly manipulate weather patterns and accelerate the growth of plant life, potentially reversing the effects of deforestation and climate change. The thought of regreening deserts and restoring balance to our ecosystems was thrilling, yet the documents cautioned about the unpredictable side effects of meddling with nature's balance. Amidst all this revolutionary potential, the documents revealed a profound sense of responsibility. There was talk of establishing a new international body to oversee and share this technology, ensuring it wouldn't become monopolized by any single nation. Transparency, cooperation, and equity seemed to be key themes, reflecting a hopeful yet cautious outlook toward the future. By the time I finished reading for the day, the room was filled with the golden glow of an afternoon well spent. My brain buzzed with possibilities, both wonderful and terrifying. Humanity was potentially on the cusp of a new age. But were we ready for it? Could we handle the responsibility of such power? The deeper I dug into the Eden Resurgence files, the more it became clear that the discovery and potential use of alien technology had not just scientific implications, but vast political ones as well. Hidden within the trove of technical documents and scientific speculation were memos and minutes from meetings that painted a picture of a world teetering on the brink of monumental change, shadowed by secrecy and the delicate dance of diplomacy. One memo detailed a covert summit held at a secure, undisclosed location, attended by representatives from various powerful countries. The agenda was heavily redacted, but the snippets that remained spoke of an opportunity for unprecedented global cooperation and a new paradigm for planetary stewardship. The tone of these discussions was urgent, the need for consensus clear. There was a sense of gravity to the proceedings, an understanding that the decisions made here could well decide the fate of our world. The summit discussions revealed a surprising level of paranoia among these global leaders, not just about the alien technology itself, but about each other. Trust was scarce. The fear of one nation gaining a technological upper hand was palpable. Yet, amidst this tension, there was an emerging narrative of hope. A proposal had been put forth to create a multinational entity dubbed the Custodians of Eden, which would oversee the research, development, and deployment of the alien technologies. This body would ensure that no single country could monopolize the benefits or the power these advancements might bring. Another intriguing document outlined plans for what was called the Eden Protocols, guidelines that would govern the ethical use and sharing of the technology. These protocols emphasized sustainability, equitable access, and strict non-militarization. The language was formal, laden with legal and diplomatic jargon, but the message was clear. This was about safeguarding the future of humanity, ensuring that these profound tools would not become weapons of war or instruments of inequality. As I read through these plans, a hopeful picture began to emerge. Perhaps, in facing a discovery as monumental as alien life and their technologies, humanity could find a way to come together, to rise above petty conflicts and short-sighted greed. The idea that countries might share knowledge and resources freely was idealistic, but the document suggested that it was not only possible but necessary. I was interrupted by a soft knock at my door, a reminder that the world outside continued to turn, oblivious to the secrets I was uncovering. As I stowed away the files for the night, my thoughts were a whirl of possibilities. Could we truly step into this new era as a united species? Or would the shadows of secrecy and fear pull us back into division? As my exploration into the Eden Resurgence files deepened, I began to uncover the broader reactions within the scientific community to this unprecedented discovery. It was clear from the numerous email exchanges and meeting notes that the academic world was both exhilarated and daunted by the potential of alien technology. But how would such groundbreaking knowledge be introduced to the public? The documents revealed a meticulous plan for public disclosure, set to unfold in stages. Initial revelations would focus on the less controversial technologies, particularly those related to energy and environmental restoration. This strategy was designed to build public trust and demonstrate the beneficial impacts of the technology before any mention of its extraterrestrial origin. One detailed report outlined the first technology to be introduced, a device capable of extracting clean water from the air, even in arid regions. The potential to combat global water scarcity was enormous, and the notes suggested that a pilot program was already being planned for several drought-stricken areas around the world. The excitement among environmental scientists was palpable. They were on the verge of testing a solution that could alter the global landscape of water resource management. Meanwhile, theoretical physicists and engineers were grappling with the more complex devices, such as the quantum energy generator. The discussions were technical, filled with complex equations and predictive models, but the underlying concern was clear: how to ensure the safe deployment of such a powerful technology. The documents included rigorous safety protocols and emergency contingency plans, a testament to the cautious approach being taken. In a series of video conferences, experts debated the best practices for integrating alien technology with existing systems. They discussed everything from infrastructure changes to the training programs needed for engineers and technicians. It was a monumental task, akin to preparing for the Industrial Revolution in hyperdrive. Amidst these preparations, there was also a significant focus on education. The files included a draft of a proposed educational curriculum that would introduce students to the basic principles of the new technologies, fostering a generation that was not only aware of, but proficient in the use of alien tech. The hope was to cultivate a culture of innovation and acceptance, paving the way for more advanced disclosures in the future. As I prepared to conclude my reading for the day, I reflected on the enormity of the situation. We were on the brink of a new era, not just technologically, but culturally and socially. The world as we knew it could change dramatically, and everything hinged on how these revelations were handled. As the day of the global unveiling approached, I found myself poring over the final batch of documents, these detailing the strategies for the public revelation of Eden Resurgence. The atmosphere in the records was tense yet hopeful. This was a coordinated effort years in the making, aiming to usher humanity into a new age of enlightenment and cooperation. The planned announcement was to be simultaneous across all UN member states, with the Secretary General leading the disclosure. A pre-recorded message was to be broadcast, explaining the origins of the technology and its potential to revolutionize every aspect of human life, from energy to medicine, from agriculture to environmental recovery. The message emphasized peace, unity, and a shared future, acknowledging the alien origin of the technology while underscoring the benefits already being felt through the pilot programs. The reaction, as detailed in the file's predictive models, was expected to be mixed. There were extensive plans in place to manage the public response, including partnerships with educational institutions, NGOs, and media outlets to ensure accurate information dissemination and to counteract misinformation. Psychological and sociological experts had crafted messages to help people process the revelation that we are not alone in the universe, and that our alien visitors had come not as conquerors, but as unintended benefactors in cryosleep. Their technology a legacy before even making contact. The documents also touched on the fate of the aliens themselves. It was a subject of intense ethical debate. The consensus, at least among the scientists and ethicists involved, was that they should remain in stasis until a firm understanding of their biology and culture could be achieved. There was a palpable reverence for these beings, a desire to respect their inherent rights while acknowledging their critical role in our future. On the day of the announcement, I watched along with the rest of the world, the collective breath of humanity held in anticipation. The Secretary General spoke eloquently about our place in the cosmos, about responsibility and opportunity. The news channels were flooded with experts dissecting every possible implication, from the scientific to the spiritual. The public reaction was overwhelmingly one of awe and curiosity. There were fears, naturally, and skeptics who doubted the origins of the technology. But as the initial shock faded, a renewed sense of unity began to take root. People talked about what this meant for our children, for the future of our planet. There was a sense of being part of something larger than ourselves, a narrative of global stewardship and interstellar community that resonated across cultures. As the weeks turned to months, the world began to adapt. New energy systems were rolled out, and medical applications from the alien technology started undergoing clinical trials. The environmental recovery projects showed promising early results, reinvigorating ecosystems that had been on the brink of collapse. Reflecting on everything, from the moment I stumbled upon those files to the world-changing revelations, I felt a profound sense of privilege and responsibility. We were witnesses to history, participants in a story that would be told for generations to come. And as I write this final entry, the sun setting on a world that knows a little more about its place in the universe, I am hopeful. Hopeful that we can rise to this occasion, that we will honor this extraordinary gift, not just with our technology, but with our actions towards each other and towards our planet. I never imagined that a casual browse on the darker corners of the internet would lead me to question the very essence of my identity. The website was just as you'd expect: black background, neon texts, and a catalog that seemed endless. But one section caught my eye: new identities for a new life. It was like something out of a spy movie, only it was right there, a click away from me, an average Joe. I should have just closed the tab, but curiosity isn't just a killer of cats, it seems. The service promised a complete overhaul: new documents, new backstory, even tips on how to embody your new persona. It was all guaranteed to be legal, or so they claimed. Start over, escape your past, or just become someone else, the tagline read. It sounded thrilling and, dare I say, tempting. My life was a series of predictable events, nothing like the adventures you read about in books or see in movies. So, in a moment of madness, I clicked on it. I filled out the form, chose a package, and within days, a neat, nondescript envelope was in my hands. I followed the instructions to the letter. The new documents were impeccable. My new name was Alexander Bennett, a graphic designer from Maine with a penchant for hiking and a completely fictional life. The novelty was exhilarating at first. I would wander around town as Alexander, practicing my new signature, adjusting to being called by a new name. It felt like playing a character in an elaborate role-playing game. But the game took a strange turn when I started noticing the changes. It began subtly. I'd find myself sketching designs on napkins and scraps of paper, something I had never done before. I couldn't even draw a straight line before all this. My closet started to change too. Clothes that definitely weren't my style began appearing among my usual attire. Leather jackets, scarves, things that Alexander, the graphic designer, would wear. But the real shock came when I looked in the mirror one evening to find a face staring back at me that was almost my own but slightly off. The eyes were a shade darker, my hair a bit longer and styled differently, as though it had been professionally cut to suit someone else's face, not mine. I began to panic, rubbing my eyes, hoping it was just poor lighting or my imagination. It wasn't. Sleep became elusive. I'd toss and turn at night, haunted by dreams of a life that wasn't mine but felt as real as any memory. I could see places I'd never visited, people I'd never met, and I could feel a strange sense of nostalgia for moments that had never happened in my life. Every morning I'd wake up feeling less like myself and more like this persona I had purchased off a website. I tried to reverse it, I really did. I shredded the documents, deleted all the emails, and even tried to go back to my old routines. But the transformation, once set in motion, seemed irreversible. My tastes in food, my skills, even my handwriting, they all aligned with Alexander's. Sitting here typing this, I find myself in a limbo. Who am I really? The boundaries of my identity are blurred, and I'm caught between a past that feels increasingly distant and a future that was never meant to be mine. It's a chilling realization. Am I still the man who clicked on that link, or have I become a product, a crafted identity shipped out to the highest bidder? And the scariest part, I'm starting to forget what it felt like to be me. After the initial shock wore off, I decided to document everything. If I was losing myself, at least I'd have a record of who I once was, and who I was becoming. It might sound odd, but I started a journal as Alexander Bennett. It wasn't just a diary, though. It became a case study. I noted everything, changes in my preferences, new skills I mysteriously acquired, and even shifts in my personality. One day, while sifting through Alexander's favorite design magazines, an interest that had overtaken my previous love for sports, I discovered an old photograph tucked between the pages. It was a picture of a place I recognized instantly, a small cafe in Maine that Alexander frequented, according to the backstory provided with my new identity. The familiarity was unnerving, like déjà vu, except it was a place I had never been. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I planned a trip. Maine was far, but I had to see if it would bring some clarity. Maybe walking the streets of Alexander's fictional hometown would help me snap out of this, or at least understand it better. The journey was peculiar. As I drove, I played Alexander's favorite music, a playlist of jazz and blues that I had inexplicably grown fond of. Each mile seemed to draw me deeper into his world, and further from mine. When I arrived in the town, it wasn't like visiting somewhere new, but rather returning home. I knew directions without needing a map, greeted by landmarks and scents that felt as familiar as those of my childhood streets. I went straight to the cafe from the photograph. It was exactly as I had known it would be, down to the quirky vintage sign hanging above the door. Inside, the owner, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, greeted me with a shocking familiarity. "Haven't seen you in a while, Alex," she said, as if I'd been a regular all my life. My heart skipped a beat. Had I unknowingly been here before? Was the identity somehow real? I spent the day roaming around town, my presence seemingly recognized by more than a few locals. At the local library, I instinctively walked to a section filled with design and art books, my fingers brushing against the spines as if reacquainting with old friends. It was then that I realized how profound this identity shift was. I wasn't just taking on superficial traits. I was absorbing a life, a history, becoming someone with a place in this world that didn't belong to me. That night, I stayed at a small inn that felt as if it were straight out of a storybook Alexander might have read. The room was quaint, decorated with local art and photographs of the coastal landscape. As I lay in bed, a terrifying thought crossed my mind. What if I continued to change, to the point where no trace of my original self remained? What if Alexander's identity didn't just alter me superficially, but erased me completely? In the quiet of the night, the gravity of my situation settled in. I was playing with something far beyond my understanding, something that wasn't just a change of paperwork, but a transformation of soul and flesh. I resolved to return home the next day, to try and reclaim my life, to find a way back to the person I used to be, before the lines blurred too much to see clearly. The trip hadn't solved the mystery, but it had sharpened the questions. But as I prepared to leave, I found a note slipped under my door, a simple message scrawled in a hand I recognized as my own, yet not. "Welcome home, Alex." The words were comforting and menacing all at once, a welcome that felt like a warning. Returning home was not the reprieve I had hoped for. The boundary between my old life and Alexander's was not just blurred, it was disintegrating. Objects around my apartment seemed foreign, as if Alexander had chosen them, not me. My tastes in food, music, even the television shows I found entertaining were now entirely his. It was as if I were a guest in my own home, navigating through someone else's life. In a desperate attempt to understand what was happening, I contacted the website again. There was no customer service number, of course, just an anonymous email address. My inquiries were met with cryptic responses, hinting that what I was experiencing was part of the transition process, and that full integration was expected. Their detached assurances did little to ease my growing unease. I needed help, but who could I turn to? Explaining this to friends or family seemed impossible. How do you tell someone that you're slowly losing your identity to a persona you bought off the dark web without sounding insane? So I turned to the only community that might believe me, the same online forums where I first learned about the identity packages. Posting my story anonymously, I asked if anyone else had experienced anything similar. The responses varied from skeptical to sympathetic, but one stood out, a user who claimed to have gone through the same ordeal and emerged on the other side. Their advice was unsettling. The only way to potentially reverse the process was to fully embrace Alexander's identity, to live out the script until it reached its natural conclusion. Reluctantly, I decided to follow this mysterious advice. I started living as Alexander full-time. I immersed myself in his world, his hobbies, his professional duties. I continued designing, reaching out to clients listed in the backstory documents, and completing projects that were supposedly underway. Each step felt like I was walking a plank, not sure if solid ground awaited or an abyss. During this time, I experienced moments of profound disorientation, where my memories seemed like scenes from a movie I had watched long ago. My childhood, my family, the real connections I had made over the years, all felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. In their place were Alexander's memories, vivid and demanding recognition. As days turned into weeks, something remarkable happened. I was contacted by a prestigious design firm in New York, one I had supposedly freelanced for as Alexander. They offered me a full-time position, impressed with the portfolio that I didn't even remember creating. The offer was lucrative, the kind of break I would have killed for in my previous life, but it came with a heavy cost, the final nail in the coffin of my true self. Accepting the job would mean moving to New York, fully stepping into Alexander's shoes, and potentially never looking back. It was a crossroads moment. Each path stretched out before me, one leading back to a fading past, the other towards a crafted future. The decision weighed heavily on me, and in a moment of clarity or madness, I realized that this might be the way out, a way to break the cycle, Perhaps if I could meet the creators of Alexander, confront them in their own game, I could reclaim my identity or at least find peace in whatever remained of it. With a heavy heart, I packed my bags, not just with clothes, but with every scrap of evidence of who I once was. Photos, old letters, anything that could anchor me to my past. As I prepared to step into a new life to chase an old one, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling of crossing an invisible threshold. But I knew there was no other way forward or back. The move to New York was a surreal experience. As Alexander, I adapted quickly to the bustling city that felt eerily familiar, despite it being my first visit. The job at the design firm was challenging yet rewarding, filled with tasks and projects that seemed tailored for skills I never knew I had. Each day, I delved deeper into Alexander's life, almost forgetting the mission that brought me here. However, reminders of my true self weren't just lingering. They were clawing their way back into my consciousness. At night, I would pore over the relics of my past, trying to stitch together the fading memories of who I once was. It was during one of these nights that I received an anonymous message on the forum where I had sought advice. The message was brief. Meet me at Central Park by the Bethesda Fountain. Tomorrow at noon. I can help you. Skeptical but desperate, I arrived at the specified location. The person waiting for me was nothing like I expected. She was a middle-aged woman, her appearance nondescript, but her eyes bore a weight of knowledge and sadness. "I know why you're here," she said without preamble. "You want to undo what's been done." She introduced herself as Dr. Elena Marks, a psychologist specializing in identity disorders, who had stumbled upon the dark web's identity trade during research for a paper. She explained that the changes I was experiencing were part of a sophisticated psychological conditioning embedded within the documents and items provided with the new identity. "It's a form of deep subconscious programming," Dr. Marks revealed, "designed to overwrite your existing personality traits with those of the fabricated identity." Dr. Marks believed that the key to reversing the effects lay in deconstructing the layers of conditioning, a process she was willing to guide me through. Over the following weeks, we met regularly, each session an intense exploration of my memories and experiences. She helped me categorize which aspects of my current life were truly mine and which were implants from Alexander's narrative. Through these sessions, I learned techniques to separate my true self from the intrusive identity traits. It was mentally exhausting work, often leaving me drained and disoriented, but gradually I began to feel like myself again. Dr. Marks encouraged me to engage in activities that connected me to my past, to re-establish my hobbies and reconnect with old friends. Despite the progress, the shadow of Alexander Bennett lingered. His presence was like a watermark on my identity, never fully disappearing. I continued working at the design firm, using the skills I had acquired, but now as tools of my own volition rather than dictates of the identity I had purchased. As I regained control over my life, the desire to confront the creators of the identity packages grew. Dr. Marks cautioned against it, warning of the potential dangers, but I felt it was something I needed to do, not just for myself, but for others who might fall into the same trap. I began my own investigation into the company behind the website, using my regained skills and the resources of the city. It was a painstaking process, tracing the digital footprints back to their source. After months of dead ends and false leads, I finally uncovered an address, discreetly hidden within the coding of the website. It was located in a nondescript building in Brooklyn, an area known for its tech startups. With every step towards the building, my heart pounded louder in my chest. I wasn't sure what I'd find or who I'd confront, but I knew this was the culmination of my journey. As I pushed open the door to the suite listed in the coding, ready to face whoever or whatever was behind the identity vendors, I was met not with a room full of hackers or a high-tech office, but a single, small, empty room with nothing but a laptop on a desk and a note left on the keyboard. The note was simple and chilling. "Identity is not just who you are. It's who you believe you are. Be careful what you wish for. The emptiness of the room echoed the hollowness I felt at that moment. The journey had ended not with a confrontation, but with a stark reminder of the power of belief and the fragility of self. I walked away from the building, not with answers or closure, but with a renewed understanding of the importance of embracing one's true identity, no matter how mundane it might seem. The walk back from that empty room felt longer than any journey I had ever undertaken. It was not just a walk through the streets of Brooklyn. It was a passage through my own psyche, a reclamation of the territory that had been almost irrevocably ceded to another. The note's message haunted me, a cruel irony that I had sought to become someone else only to find profound truth in my original, unaltered self. In the weeks that followed, my life took on a new rhythm, one that was unmistakably mine. I continued to work at the design firm, but now under my real name, having explained my bizarre situation as a sort of method acting for a project that had gone too far. Surprisingly, or perhaps not, they were supportive. It turned out that authenticity had a value that was hard to deny, even in a field as inherently transformative as graphic design. Dr. Marks and I concluded our sessions, and she was confident that the worst was behind me. She had documented our sessions, considering them a case study in identity resilience and psychological flexibility. There was talk of a paper that might help others understand the dangers of identity manipulation, whether by external forces or by our own hand. One day, as I was organizing some of Alexander's remaining documents before finally getting rid of them, I found a small flash drive tucked away in a concealed pocket of the envelope. Curiosity once again got the better of me, and I plugged it into my computer. It contained a single file, a video. In the video, a figure shrouded in shadows spoke directly to the camera. The voice was distorted, but the message was clear. It was an apology of sorts, from the creator of the identity kits. They explained that the project had started as a social experiment, a theoretical exploration of identity fluidity and adaptability. But it had spiraled out of control, becoming more dangerous and invasive than intended. The figure expressed remorse, stating that all operations had been terminated and that I was one of the last clients. The video concluded with a warning about the digital age's ability to disconnect us from our true selves, urging viewers to guard their identities against all forms of erosion, technological, societal, or personal. The sincerity in the message was palpable, but it did little to mitigate the months of confusion and transformation I had endured. Armed with this new understanding, I became an advocate for digital identity security and psychological safety. I started speaking at conferences, sharing my story not for sensationalism, but as a cautionary tale. My experience had given me a unique insight into the fragility of the self in the digital world, and I was determined to use that insight to help others navigate their journeys with greater awareness and care. As I rebuilt my life, I found solace in the mundane, the everyday choices that defined me. I rekindled old friendships, picked up hobbies that I had abandoned under the weight of Alexander's preferences, and started to write, a memoir perhaps, or maybe just a long letter to myself, a reminder of the journey I had taken and the home I had found within myself. Looking back, the identity experiment had been a descent into a world I never should have explored, but it had also been a crucible, forging a version of myself that was stronger and more authentic. I had ventured into the depths of another identity only to discover the unshakable truth of my own. In the end, the most profound discovery was that the person I was meant to be had been there all along, waiting patiently for me to return and reclaim the life that was rightfully mine. It was late August when I stumbled across the listing on an online auction site known for its questionable legality. The item was a nondescript laptop, described only as vintage and as is. I've always been a sucker for old tech, intrigued by the secrets old machines hold the stories they've been part of. Bidding was minimal, almost non-existent, so for a mere $25 and some shipping, the old beast was mine. The laptop arrived a week later, wrapped more meticulously than a museum artifact. Peeling away the layers of bubble wrap, I was met with a bulky, early 2000s model, the kind that boasted more heft than horsepower. Plugging it in, I half expected it not to boot, but to my surprise, it whirred to life, its fan groaning like a distant storm. The desktop was barren except for the usual recycling bin icon and a single, oddly named application, Echo Chat. Curiosity piqued, I double-clicked the icon. A chat window opened, its interface a relic of the past, simplistic and utilitarian. The only channel available was titled Static, and it was as empty and quiet as a forgotten tomb. As I sat there staring at the blank chat, a crackle came through the laptop speakers. Startled, I adjusted the volume, thinking it was just a glitch. But then, amidst the white noise, a whisper. "Hello?" The voice was faint, almost drowned out by the static, but unmistakably human. Thinking it was a prank, I typed a hesitant "hello" into the chat. The channel remained silent for a long minute before another whisper came through, clearer this time. "Can you hear me?" it asked. "Yes," I typed back, my fingers trembling slightly. "Who is this?" No response came for a while. I considered shutting it down, dismissing it as some elaborate hoax, but then the voice returned, a note of urgency in its tone. "Listen carefully." I leaned in, straining to hear over the static. The voice continued, "I don't have long. They don't know I can still talk here." "Who are they?" I asked, intrigued and unnerved in equal measure. "No time," the voice hurried. "Look beneath the battery. It's important." Bewildered, I turned off the laptop and flipped it over. Removing the battery revealed a hidden compartment I would have never noticed otherwise. Inside, there was a small, worn notebook, filled with what appeared to be codes and notes in several languages, some of which I recognized and others I did not. As I flipped through the pages, the gravity of what I held hit me. Each page was a meticulous record of observations, dates, times, events that seemed ordinary but felt charged with a clandestine significance. It was as if I was looking at a diary of someone who was meticulously tracking something. What that was, though, I couldn't yet understand. With the notebook in hand, I sat back down, a chill running through the room, or perhaps through my own anticipation. I booted up the laptop again, eager to ask a million questions. But the EchoChat application wouldn't launch this time. No matter how many times I clicked, it only gave me an error. Channel not found. The whispers had ceased. The static channel was silent, and I was left alone with a notebook full of cryptic scribbles and a growing sense of unease. What had I stumbled upon? And more importantly, was I ready to uncover the secrets that someone had gone through great lengths to conceal? Tucking the notebook into my desk drawer, I resolved to dig deeper. After all, curiosity hadn't just killed the cat, it had led it to the most intriguing stories. With the notebook safely stowed away, my thoughts were a whirlwind of speculation. I spent the night wrestling with the decision to delve deeper into its contents or to push it aside, attributing everything to an elaborate hoax. Curiosity, as it often does, won the battle. The next morning I sat down with a fresh cup of coffee and opened the notebook again. This time my approach was methodical, examining each entry with a critical eye. Each note was more puzzling than the last. They mentioned locations scattered around the globe, times that didn't seem to align with any logical sequence, and names that seemed ordinary, yet were marked with urgent asterisks. What was Project Echo? Who were the listeners? These terms popped up repeatedly throughout the notebook. One entry in particular caught my eye, a sketch of what appeared to be a radio tower, annotated with coordinates leading to a remote area in Norway. Beside it, a single sentence. It all comes back to this. Driven by an insatiable need to understand, I decided to reach out to a friend who dabbled in amateur radio and cryptology. Perhaps he could make sense of the cryptic entries. Over a secure call, I explained my bizarre acquisition and the mysterious notebook. He was skeptical, but intrigued. "Send me pictures of the pages. Let's see if there's a pattern or something we can decode," he suggested. While waiting for his analysis, I tried reopening the EchoChat application on the laptop. To my surprise, it launched, but the channel was still filled with static. This time, however, amidst the white noise, I could faintly make out different voices, each whispering disjointedly. It was as if I were listening to a crowded room from a great distance. Straining to find coherence in the chaos, I caught snippets of conversation that seemed oddly displaced in time. A discussion about a political event that happened decades ago. A family speaking about day-to-day affairs from what sounded like the mid-20th century. It was as if the laptop was picking up echoes from the past. My phone buzzed. It was my friend, and his voice bore an edge of excitement. "You've got something here. Some of these notes correspond to significant historical moments, others to scientific data that doesn't belong in the public domain. This Project Echo, it might have been some kind of experimental surveillance or something more esoteric." "Esoteric? How?" I pressed, my grip tightening around the phone. Like attempting to capture voices from the ether. Sounds impossible, but with the right tech, maybe they were trying to listen across time or dimensions, he speculated. His words sent a shiver down my spine, but I quickly dismissed the feeling, focusing instead on the implications. If he was right, the laptop could be a relic from an experiment bending the very fabric of reality, and I was inadvertently caught in its web. Armed with this new information, I resolved to dig deeper into the notebook's clues. I needed to understand the full scope of Project Echo. Perhaps, just perhaps, the voices whispering through the static were not just random interference, but messages needing to be heard. As I delved into the next page marked with a red flag, the air around me felt charged with the weight of impending revelations. I was no longer just a bystander. I was part of the story, a story that was far from over. The past week had transformed my quiet home office into a makeshift detective agency. Papers were strewn about, highlighted and annotated with my growing understanding of the cryptic notebook. Each entry unraveled a bit more of the enigmatic puzzle of Project Echo. The latest revelation had come from decoding a series of numbers that appeared to be dates and coordinates, aligning them with significant but lesser-known scientific experiments around the world. My focus for today was a flagged entry titled "The Core Frequency." According to the notes, it was the central piece to understanding the function of Project Echo. The entry described a specific frequency that, when broadcasted, allegedly allowed for communication with what the author termed non-local consciousness. This idea seemed far-fetched, but the evidence in the notebook was compelling. Determined to test this theory, I had set up a basic radio transmitter with the help of my friend. The plan was to broadcast at the frequency noted in the notebook and monitor any responses. Admittedly, I was skeptical. After all, the concept of reaching out to consciousnesses beyond our physical realm felt like something out of a science fiction novel. As the transmitter hummed to life, the static-filled room seemed to pulse with potential energy. I spoke into the microphone, a simple message: "Is anyone there?" The static in the background swelled, then settled into a rhythmic pattern. I repeated my question, feeling slightly absurd but driven by an unshakable curiosity. Minutes ticked by without incident, and my initial skepticism returned. Just as I was about to shut down the equipment, the static changed. Voices emerged, faint and overlapping, growing clearer with each passing second. This time, they weren't disjointed snippets of past conversations, but direct responses. "We hear you," a chorus of voices said, startlingly clear. The voice was neutral, ageless, and without a discernible origin. "You have tuned into the core." Heart racing, I asked, Who are you? We are the collected, the echoes of the core frequency, existing within and beyond your time, the voices answered. Their tone was neither menacing nor friendly, simply factual. My hands trembled as I scribbled notes. This was beyond anything I had anticipated. What is Project Echo? I ventured. A gateway project, an experiment bridging thought frequencies between dimensions. Its conclusion was never observed. It was abandoned, its potential unknown. They explained. Abandoned? That could explain the secretive nature of the notes, the hidden compartment, and the silence surrounding the project's outcomes. But why was the laptop disposed of in such a manner? And why contact me? Why communicate with me? I asked, voicing my thoughts. Your acquisition of the transmitter was not incidental. You are now part of the continuation, the voices intoned. The weight of their words hung heavy in the air. Part of the continuation? Did this mean that the project was somehow self-sustaining, seeking out participants across time and space to fulfill its undefined purpose? As the conversation progressed, it became clear that I had only scratched the surface of something much larger. The voices, though cryptic, provided insights into the nature of consciousness and the fabric of reality that I had never considered. The session ended as abruptly as it began, the voices fading back into static. I was left with a recorder full of extraordinary claims and a mind brimming with questions. The implications were enormous, not just for me, but potentially for all of humanity. The revelations from the core had left me sleepless for nights on end, my mind tirelessly weaving through the implications of what I had unearthed. The once benign reality of my daily life now thrummed with the undercurrent of something profound and unseen, hidden just beyond the veil of the ordinary. Determined to understand the full scope of Project Echo and my role in this continuation, I began poring over historical data and scientific journals that might explain or at least hint at the technologies capable of bridging thought frequencies. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that this project intersected with theories of quantum physics and consciousness, areas that were still rife with mystery and debate within the scientific community. With a cautious approach, I reached out to a university professor specializing in quantum mechanics, under the guise of being a science fiction author researching a new book. To my relief, she was intrigued rather than skeptical, and our conversations added layers of complexity to my understanding. She spoke of quantum entanglement and the theoretical possibility of consciousness existing outside the physical body, concepts that eerily echoed the claims of the voices from the core. As weeks turned into months, my home office transformed into a labyrinth of research papers, books, and scribbled notes. The laptop and its static-filled chat became my portal to another dimension of understanding, and I dedicated every spare moment to experimenting with the frequency, adjusting variables, trying to establish clearer, more controlled communication. Then, on a chilly November evening, as the wind howled outside, the voices returned with a clarity that sent shivers down my arms, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the connection. "You are ready to see," they intoned, a solemn whisper against the backdrop of swirling static. "See what?" I asked, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. "The layers of reality, the threads that connect all consciousness. You must witness it to comprehend fully." The next instructions were precise. They guided me to set up an array of mirrors and lenses around the laptop, creating a makeshift optical device that, according to the voices, would allow me to visualize the frequencies I was interacting with. The setup was bizarre, resembling a prop from an old science fiction movie, but every piece was essential, they assured. With everything in place, I activated the transmitter. The air around me vibrated, the static grew louder, and then the room was filled with light. Not just any light, but streams of vibrant colors that danced around the room, coalescing into shapes and forms that defied description. They were like living hieroglyphs telling stories, conveying emotions directly into my mind. These were the thought frequencies, the essence of consciousness that traveled across dimensions, the core of Project Echo's ambition. I stood there, awestruck as the forms shifted, narratives of lives unknown playing out in spectral light. The demonstration lasted only a few minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When it ended, the room dimmed, and I was left in the quiet aftermath, trying to process the profound beauty and complexity of what I had seen. This was not just a scientific experiment. It was an encounter with the very essence of existence, a peek into the continuum of consciousness that bound all life together. The voices had promised understanding, and they had delivered an experience that transcended ordinary knowledge. As I documented the experience, the implications of sharing this knowledge with the world weighed heavily on me. How could I convey the enormity of this discovery? Who would believe me? And more importantly, what would the consequences be? In the weeks following my encounter with the thought frequencies, I was enveloped in a mix of awe and apprehension. The visuals I had witnessed weren't just extraordinary, they were transformative. Yet, I hesitated. The responsibility of sharing this knowledge felt immense, almost burdensome. How could I ensure that such profound insights wouldn't be misused or dismissed as mere fantasy? The static-filled channel of the laptop had been silent since the demonstration, as if the voices had stepped back, leaving me to ponder my next steps alone. I took this time to carefully document everything: the setup, the process, the visuals, and the interactions. My notes became both a scientific journal and a personal diary, capturing the factual and the emotional journey. During a quiet, introspective evening, the voices returned unexpectedly. Their presence was now familiar, less startling, but always significant. "You have seen the layers. Now you must choose," they intoned, their whisper resonating with a gravity that filled the room. "Choose what exactly?" I asked, my voice a mix of curiosity and caution. "The path forward," they replied. "Humanity stands at a crossroads. The knowledge of Project Echo can lead to enlightenment or catastrophe. We cannot choose for you." The weight of their words was palpable. The choice was indeed mine, but the implications were global. I thought of the notebook, the cryptic entries, the hidden messages. All of it led to this moment, this decision. "I need guidance," I admitted. "How can I make sure this knowledge is used wisely?" "Share it selectively," they advised. "Build a community of thinkers, scientists, philosophers, and leaders who respect the fabric of consciousness. Grow this knowledge like a seed, carefully and with intent." Their counsel felt right. It wasn't about broadcasting this discovery to the world, but nurturing it, ensuring it could develop into something beneficial and not destructive. With a renewed sense of purpose, I reached out to a select group of trusted colleagues and experts from various fields. I shared my findings, framed as a theoretical exploration into quantum consciousness. The discussions that followed were rich with enthusiasm and caution, mirroring my own feelings. As the project gained a quiet momentum, I kept a close communication with the core voices. They guided, observed, and sometimes challenged, pushing the boundaries of my understanding and the project's direction. Months turned into a year, and what started as a solitary encounter evolved into a collaborative, interdisciplinary exploration known as the Echo Collective. We were a group dedicated to understanding and applying the knowledge of thought frequencies responsibly, ensuring that the whispers through the static became a symphony of progress. The laptop, once just an old piece of tech, stood now in my office as a symbol of this journey. A portal that had opened not just into other dimensions of consciousness, but into a new chapter of human understanding. As I documented the final entry in my comprehensive report on Project Echo, I felt a sense of completion, but also of beginning. There was much more to explore, more to understand, and more to safeguard. The voices had one last message before they faded, possibly for good. "You have chosen well. Remember, the static is not empty. It is full of whispers, waiting for those who listen. With that, the static dissolved into silence, leaving behind a legacy of knowledge and a future filled with potential.